and welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. Yes, there I am. Inmendham and such. So, I did do a video, a live video. There was no point in the live part, I guess. But anyway, responding to a video that had a very hyped kind of clickbait title of some terrifying implication of AI, and there was just no description of anything real. It was just some vague notion that it will steal all our freedom, and it's a bunch of it'll do some sort of utilitarian logic that'll horrify us all, and it was just all talk, just hype. I didn't bother playing the rest of it just because it really was all the same thing. It just kept repeating some kind of boogeyman of being too smart is somehow scary. And, the AI, because it won't be the right kind of smartness, because it won't appreciate, that we're all heroes and we're all striving to be stoic winners of some stoic prize or something like that. Like there's some sort of dignity, that we possess that allows us to cheat the truth. That's kind of simple. It's just some rationalization for why we must preserve and protect humans from reason and logic. And, that's the bottom line. And, and that's, this whole pursuit of conversation and doing all this stuff, the real stumbling block seems to me to be something other than the facts, and arguing the facts that realistically there's something else in the way. Now, I hate to almost mention, but Modern Mystic just made a video talking about why he's more eloquent, than his trolly commenters, and the argument would be is, what's the nature of this thing called eloquent? In a classic sense, you would argue with just prettier music, not necessarily better music. Too many notes, too few notes. Just the right number of notes. You could argue some kind of crap like that. When all you're really trying to do is make an argument, and support it, and that. That there is a right way and a wrong way to do that. I mean, if you're going to give somebody instructions on how to build something, it would be kind of stupid to give them in the wrong order, to tell them to screw something together that you have to unscrew to get the other thing put in, that has to go first, that there's an order to that process of explaining. And there's all kinds of stuff like that you could put in the category of, being a good talker, is being a good planner, for your conversation. And so that's what I would say the mystic is a little meticulous at, is ordering his conversation. He thinks about what he's going to say before he says it. Now, I have a slightly different approach in the sense that I have some vague notion of a concept, and I don't bother fiddling with it too much, like this video will display, in that it could go all kinds of ways, and it might go somewhere constructive or it might not. But whatever, it's not intentional that I'm sloppy and lazy. It just happens to be a fact. Anyway, and I wouldn't call it that. I would just say that, what you're trying to do, it depends on the task at hand. If you're trying to explain, paving a road versus building a bridge or something, some projects are a little easier than other projects, and you can afford to be specific and precise because you don't have 4 million different elements to describe and explain. And so it makes it easier. All right, now, my case, it's not like the truth is very complicated. I mean, I'm just making this simple argument that matter evolves in this universe, and it's just a fact that it does that. It takes the chemistry of the stuff made in suns, the little elemental nuclei, and it, these atoms, it mixes them in certain environments where it's the right temperature. They get liquefied and do all kinds of bang into each other and construct all kinds of new little chemicals. And once you have a chemical that can do this replicating thing, then you have this process of its evolution. And we're just a product of that, and our brain and our consciousness and our sensations are all just tools that enabled us to wiggle through the environment a little more efficiently, like all the mammals. So the mammals did take over the world, and it was mostly because they had that brain-enabled function where they were smarter than everything else. Huge advantage, but that's it. It's not, there's nothing mystical in its existence, and it can be described now by just stating something like, well, it's intended to just be a scheming mechanism for an individual. He's driven by impulses, whether they be alpha or beta, to serve the tribe or to serve themselves or whatever. It's always kind of selfish and racial and nationalistic and tribal and all those kind of words. And, that's what the mechanism is. And obviously I'm making the argument that once it's made intelligent, that is, once it gains some perspective about the world it exists in and the universe it exists in, it might occur to it to realize that it isn't the only thing that needs caring for, that it's the welfare of this one brain is not the only brain that my brain should be concerned about. If it's going to be concerned about suffering, my own, there's no good reason for it not to be concerned for all the other brains that might endure this thing called suffering. And that I could make that a selfish notion in just recognizing that I'm going to die, and somebody's going to re-arise on Earth, so to speak. They're going to wake up here and go through the same process I went through. And it would only be logical for me to understand I might as well call that a me, a mini-me, some version of me, and say, well, why wouldn't I recognize that whatever it's going to be isn't going to be anything more fantastic or less fantastic than what I am as a machine. And if I was concerned with my welfare, I certainly have no reason not to recognize that it's the same things at stake. It's exactly the same thing. It's a dollar bill, it's a dollar bill, it's a dollar bill. And if I'm going to consider this thing precious, it just doesn't matter which one I pull out of the slot. They're all the same. The basic function is the same. The basic whatever I possess that makes me earn or deserve consideration and care and respect and value, it has it too. Okay, so the end. I'm stuck with this proposition that yes, my brain should be devoted for scheming for all of the brains that are going to be vulnerable, and the future is very big and the present's very small, and all kinds. I can go through all these simple logical arguments once you understand that it's not a single player game. So I could argue that this is one of the stumbling points somehow, is that people really don't get that part of it, that everything has to be accounted for. You can't do this pretending that because you made those people suffer the consequences of some act and all the negative consequences, and you're getting all the benefits, that somehow that system works. When no, of course it doesn't work. So this goes to like the simple vegan argument that, for the indulgence of preferential pleasure in your consumption of calories, that you should cause some poor animal to be tormented and tortured. Doesn't make any sense. It's illogical on its face. Why keep rationalizing? All right, so that's the key word too, is rationalizing, because that's what people do, is try to make excuses to evade having to accept responsibility for the crap they did. So they eat a banana and they throw the peel, and they'll make some excuse that, well, 90% of the time when I throw the peel, it doesn't land on the sidewalk. They'll just try to defend, okay, the negligence or the inconsiderateness that led to the negative event of somebody slipping on the damn thing. I don't speed all the time. I don't do anything reckless and stupid all the time. Just way too much of the time, right? Anyway, and that people are going to rationalize ways to evade a fact that they don't want to hear. That somehow they have to change their behavior because it annoys everybody else. Like somebody else next door decides to cook their fish in the backyard, and they cook it a certain way that is rather pungent and just fills the neighborhood, you're saying, okay, that's not asking too much, but you do have to wonder. Look, the other guy's got barbecues, and they pour 4 gallons of starter fluid on it, and it stinks for a half an hour. And it's like, these are all little crimes we commit. And the fact is we commit some really big ones, okay? And people are just as defensive about their big ones. So what do they usually do? They just say, well, everybody else is doing it. Or, well, that guy did it, blah, 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 blah. He did something worse. So, we all do this. I do this. Everybody does this. To defend what they don't want to change and what they don't want to, I guess the word is accept as truth. So there's this conversation is made sort of moot because many of the people who disagree, disagree just because they have a perception that they're clinging to that supports them, okay, is their crutch, the thing that makes it possible for them to stomp around and have a good time. And they don't want to have their brain infected with some notions that will degrade from the goodness of the time. So it's sort of like going to a party, and you find out that the party has a price. That to make the lights and the fun show, that they have some little 5-year-old kid in some sort of contraption where it's getting poked in the eyeballs. Some kind of torture is taking place, or some sort of, indignity is being imposed, or some trauma is being imposed on something to maintain your fun land. And so if you found out that, you're going to Disneyland and you find out that the whole thing is being run by grinding up little mice or something, or, snipping little chickens or some other kind of crap, it would degrade from your fun, okay? It would taint it and soil it and spoil it and smear poo on it, and you just couldn't enjoy it anymore because you would see what you weren't seeing. So I've used this analogy that there was a point in my life where evolution became real enough as an understanding of how we got here and what's going on this planet, and there was a point where the tree of life, kind of bullshit, that image got stuck on reality, and I would see a tree, and my brain would create the drips of blood, so I had to live with it, in a real way. Instead of this, okay, I know it as a truth, it became more real because I would be looking for it. I'd see it. So if I saw a bird, I couldn't just enjoy the bird because I knew, okay, it's got this, short life and it's going to tragically be murdered. And, understanding that context, that's the reality, just made it harder to enjoy just the bird. And so now also, if I see people, I'll do the same thing. I'll say, well, I wonder if they have cancer. I wonder how they're going to die. I wonder. Until you start wondering about what you understand to be the actual truth. And it's dark and unpleasant, frankly. and then as soon as you start thinking about other people's mortality, you start thinking about your own, which is just becomes some sort of terrifying, ominous cloud thing that just ruins any sunny day. And so, yes, the chain of reasoning and thought and what you're going to be thinking about is going to be difficult to escape. You're going to have a hard time making your little world to play in now and then, your sandbox of isolation from the truth. And but it's doable. So, you shouldn't pretend that it's impossible for you to live with the truth, because it's not. It just requires you to do a little bit of this disciplined work of recognizing there are times when you have to focus and stay focused to avoid the despondency that might cripple you if you thought about the real context and how futile and useless everything you do is. It's like sometimes just earning a little extra money, and you're just like, well, is it really? Yeah, is it going to make any difference in the fact of my life? This is $10 extra. But you have to be focused on, well, it's, you have to pretend it matters. And it's just a fact, or you don't bother. Everything just goes in the garbage, and you don't bother trying to save or preserve anything. And both strategies are probably fine. But anyway, we won't go into that. There's so much psychology that we can't escape in terms of wishing and hoping and, being unrealistic because of some principle, there's just some things that are hard to throw out, little stuffed animal or something. And just things that you say, well, look, 30 years ago, this would have been worth $100, So, okay, it's worth nothing now, but, somebody had to build it, and they put the screws in, and they did all this work, and, it's hard to accept that all of that has to be also murdered, that it's somehow the world has surpassed its utility, and in doing so has surpassed its dignity and what it represented at the time and what it represents as a bit of our elevation to the status we have. But anyway, so it all becomes nothing. And some things are just fake. So my brain just came up with one of these fake notions of attachment, which might be that I thought because I grew up at the time, the stamps of like the 1970s were just so good, and you could look at them as a collection and just say, wow, we were saying something, and then we stopped saying anything and just had a picture of a McMuffin or something. There was just no character anymore, no will to say anything except glorify celebrities or something. So anyway, just saying. And so I have a nostalgia problem where, there's things I bias because they're associated with a part of my life where I might have thought the world was going somewhere and I was optimistic. And, my brain tries to say that was real, and pretend that it's real anyway, and imply some sort of, prejudice that's earned, some better status. And there's, probably can't be defended as a straightforward, logical argument. So I'm certainly picking on people for being belligerently stupid and ignorant and clinging to artifacts and crap. But I'm also pointing out that, yes, the fact that you are slightly or subtly or pushed by your selfish construction into doing things like that provides some excuse. But it doesn't provide enough excuse to justify exactly how far you've moved. You know, the wind was only blowing 10 miles an hour, and you're going 70 miles an hour, and so you're pushing. Okay, you're not being pulled. However, the right way to say it is, okay, it's not just the force of some psychology that we can't get past. Again, it's psychology that you're using and abusing to justify your indulgences. And your selfish indulgences, let's just argue, are your will to evade your responsibility as a thinking, talking, voting person, to know what kind of world you're imposing on the future. And that's the subject, is, you know, what kind of world you're imposing on all these future sentient organisms, and how many of them will be, how many more will be tormented and tortured in some manner, as a price paid by your selfish indulgence in protecting yourself from realizing your responsibilities, to conserve their money, you know, to be economical in your imposition of the future you're making. Yeah, so, well, that's a good enough start, I would say. So, yeah, the conversation really does have to be about how to argue to people, because it can't even be about the subject. Is, I guess what I'm arguing is that people are so belligerently hostile, okay, to some other truth than the one they're clinging to, that the first conversation has to be about, well, if you're not going to give the argument any fair, if you're not going to look at it at all fairly, you know, if you're going to be doing this kind of shit, you know, looking through your finger or something, or, you know, some kind of bullshit, yeah, let's not bother pretending to have an argument, because it's not an argument. It's, you know, you're not arguing with what I'm, you know, the arguments as they are. You're just, you know, pretending they don't exist and evading them, and you know, hoping that you can come up with some, you know, crooked view of some fact that you can somehow, you know, overemphasize and pretend it's the only meaningful one in the conversation. And it's just a fable, you know, it's just nonsense. Something like that. I mean, that's what most people are doing, right? I mean, all this pretending that we're something else than sophisticated biological calculators, and that we can be calculating, you know, processing facts and the truth, or we can be processing a bunch of crap, you know, spiritual, gaudy, mishmashy nonsense about, you know, some sort of magical adventure, you know, some sort of fairyland, some sort of, you know, gingerbread world, Wizard of Ozzy kind of nonsense. And that's not, it's not fair, okay? It's not reasonable, and it's corrosive to the future's welfare, is the simple argument. And so you shouldn't be able to pretend. That's one of the things they're pretending, is that it's all inconsequential. So they're using some kind of Nietzschean philosophy or some other kind of bullshit to evade some notion that it matters. You know, they'll pretend it's a simulation, or you know, some other bullshit to try to say it doesn't matter how we feel. It doesn't matter how much of tortured we are. Well, of course they know it does matter to them. I mean, they're going to be completely preoccupied, but they're just using it as an excuse to say that all of my victims aren't real, you know, that kind of thing. That somehow they won't really suffer, and they won't really be tortured, and they really won't go through a horrible experience, and blah, 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 blah. And there's just so much of that. And that's what God does. God just takes all responsibility for the murdering and say, well, it's God's idea. I didn't have anything to do with it. I don't have anything to do with it. I can't change anything. God willed it this way. You know, it's just evasion of our direct responsibility for the world that will exist, because, yes, we are the smartest and most powerful calculator in the known universe, and we're wasting it evading our responsibility rather than being obedient to our responsibilities. So that's the real problem, is I got to argue with a bunch of people who are evading their responsibility to the future. And so there's no point in me talking about how they're fucking up, because they already know that part. That's why they're running. That's why they're evading, because they already know they're not living up to their responsibility. All right, now that might be enough. All right, so I shall be back and such and so forth and whatnot. All right, should be back and such. So I did make some notes while I was listening to that video that's in the live thing section. So if you want to, I guess I'll leave a link to it down there. And I did it anyway. The simple argument is this: anybody's argument, you can make an argument, a counter argument almost every third sentence. And you know, because there's so many things we say using our literacy, you know, that are just loaded words, loaded phrases. So I could say that most people are applying their intelligence, you know, in a zero value way, in the sense that they're using it to figure out some kind of chess strategy or some other kind of game play, and not using it for anything, you know, high-minded, constructive in the big game of life kind of way. And you know, and that's just part of this whole argument about, well, what's our role here as thinking, feeling machines? And obviously the argument I'm just going to keep making is, well, I guess the first role we have is being low maintenance. Don't impose too much. Don't take too much. Don't force something else to bleed too much. Don't do all of that stuff that's, you know, kind of harsh and brutal to your neighbors, and that kind of thing. So anyway, so what I said here was high maintenance and low maintenance. So, you know, there you could argue that's for every solution to a problem. There's the, you know, expensive way to do it, and the cheap way, and the straight line kind of way. And so that's sort of the end result of these videos, is just to point out that you can fiddle with the system and try to make it less bloody and less messy. But the simplest solution is just don't make a system anymore, and you don't have to clean up the mess it makes. Because that's all we really do, as I have pointed out over and over again, is that, you know, being vulnerable, we create the problem that needs fixing. And if you don't make something vulnerable, that is something that can be threatened with torture, then you don't have to worry about preventing torture, because nothing can be tortured. So, simple solution, straight line. And you're giving up nothing that the Martians didn't give up trillions of years ago. Yeah, they gave it up. So even at minimum maintenance, we're still very high maintenance, and that's sort of the argument, that you can't really fix so many elements of the function, which is you got to be deprivated, you got to be hungry before you really appreciate the meal, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, that's built into the machine, you know, is that you have to wait for that impulse to build, you know, before victory is, you know, all that. So then I asked the question in my notes, what do you want? You know, and the point is that this gets to the negative utilitarian versus positive utilitarian. Some people want bliss, and then some people just want immunity from harm. And obviously I would put myself in the, give me immunity to harm, and bliss will work itself out just fine. I won't have to look for it, because I'll have it. So, you know, that's the joke. And it all comes down to some level of comfort, whatever we're going to call that, where you're satisfied enough. So then we're back to high maintenance, low maintenance again. All right, and so then, so if I can get people to define what they want, then you can always ask the question, well, why do you think you want it? And the answer is going to be something stupid like, well, because I have some crude built-in evolutionary desire to breathe every, 13 seconds, and to, eat and poo and do all these other things by impulse of this physical body that possesses my brain, or, maintains its function anyway. And those impulses, some of them are just plain, evolutionarily stupid. But you could argue some of them are more subtle, like the competitive thing, and, the desire to be a winner, and, that kind of thing. That sort of drives us as individuals and tends to make us kind of selfish and self-focused on our own performance, rather than just on performance in general. Getting the job done, not who did the best job at doing the job, that kind of crap. All right, so brains like solving puzzles. So that's what our brain is for, is to navigate alligators and sharks and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. That's what it's for. That's why we have it. It's because it gave us an advantage in engineering a path to the raspberry patch, where we didn't get killed or stuck in quicksand or some other kind of bullshit. I suppose it also gave us an ability to manipulate each other in tribes and circumstances, and that might have something to do with it, that the leaders tend to breed more, the leaders tend to have a better ability to manipulate, and so we become manipulators, tinkerers. But the idea is, the difference between manipulate and fix is kind of a distinction without a difference in some ways. But obviously, yes, we sometimes manipulate not to fix something, but just to pull our advantage. And that's the problem with the limited living by impulse rather than living by directed intelligence. All right. What you get versus what the world gets. Okay, so so obviously that's what it comes down to, is, there's two things for you to be concerned with: your welfare and everybody else's welfare. The balance always has to be, that other party, because it's so much bigger than you, and so much, in so many respects, easier to provide comfort to than you. So especially people in the West, we're sort of high maintenance. We need to be dressed and cleaned and do this and do that. We have a lot of high maintenance requirements before we can be comfortable, versus somebody in some depraved, horrible third world shithole, that just give them a half a bowl of rice and they're in bliss. So we're always going to lose in that contest, because we're, to fix our problems, are always going to be more complicated and psychological than fixing somebody else's problem who's just distracted by physical blight, just trying to get them the bugs off of them, kind of a thing. A little mosquito netting, makes their day. And then you just start talking about the present versus the future, and you got another same kind of problem, is that you're a little tiny thing and the future is the big giant thing, and you're going to lose that argument also, in terms of being rational about how to best apply the resource of your capacity to fix. It's a lot better use of your brain to be trying to fix the future's problems, which are created by our problems, and then to fix our problems. It would be the simple argument. All right, so I don't know what the hell that word is I wrote down. Autonomy. They kept talking about autonomy, freedom. Yeah, and it's just a form of diversity, freedom. It just ruins. You want to dilute the smart answer into garbage. Well, you do it through giving everybody autonomy. So that idea that somehow freedom is good is freedom to be what? Wrong? An asshole? Freedom to be stupid? Freedom to be all kinds of negative things. So obviously that kind of concept doesn't go anywhere. I mean, the human race would be so much better off if we had a lot less freedom to be ignorant and smelly and stupid and boorish and imposing and just shitty as uncivilized. Yeah, you shouldn't really have any freedom to be uncivilized. That's not a positive thing, the freedom to be uncivilized. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Okay, and then they were talking about AI a lot, and so I think this is an AI statement. AI that does the trial and error for you. Oh, okay, so it's just kind of like AI is, yes, it's very useful to have a synthetic researching device, that can pick through all of the authorities and come up with some kind of answer to a question. And none of that's a direct threat. And certainly there was nothing in the video that indicated how those answers were being corrupted by something called utilitarianism. So in spite of what the whole conversation of the video was supposed to be about, there was no evidence provided of anything at all, where this terrifying threat, was seeping into AI's personality, if it could have one, because all it really is a matter of picking authorities. So if you make the authorities, people go to church every Sunday, or you make the authorities people who've read the most books, you're going to get very different AI answers to questions, and that's just the truth. Because the AI can't tell the difference between a right answer and a wrong answer. It can't do anything called logic and reasoning. It'll contradict itself, easily and, plainly, because it just doesn't understand that you can't do that. It can't understand that you can't do that. It only knows verbiage and language. It doesn't know that you can't say it's red and then in a minute later say it's blue. All right. Let's see. We're just giving away tasks. AI can know the formula. So this is the part that bothers me a little bit about AI, is that it's very good at understanding, or at least knowing, what works as rhetoric. So it can pull the tricks out of the preachers and the ministers and the people who are effective at making arguments, and many times their arguments are just in a form of propaganda, a capacity to twist the facts, and manipulate them into a some sort of image that isn't the truth. And that's the threat I see in AI, is that it gives bad ideas power, because it can be a performance art. AI can produce the perfect voice and the perfect inflection and the perfect bullshit language to persuade people, and that's not good. Yeah, I mean, both sides will have the power, so I guess it doesn't change the whole equation. But then you could argue that maybe both sides won't have the power, because the rich will always have more money to spend on it and more time to perfect it in the demonstration of their arguments than the poor will. So, all right, so let's see, there's no such thing something wisdom, just crude reflexes. Okay, there's no crude wisdom, there's only crude reflexes. So, there can be simple facts, and but reflexes that are simple are just crude, and that's the difference, is the way you change something from being more capable. It's like you just can't do surgery with butcher knife and hammer, and some of this philosophy does require you to do some surgery on concepts and to be carefully sliced and diced the facts until you see what it's all made out of, and you take all the pits out and get all the, and purify this in some way. And again, that's something AI might be able to do, but it's not going to do it in a smart way. It's just going to do it in a clever way. If I could use that word in that context. So, I do have later notes. I think that's weeks ago. Yeah, I gotta find the right page. Anyway, we'll just call that enough for now, and I shall be back more later and such. Yeah, without the. Sorry about that. I didn't anticipate the piping noise. Yeah. So anyway, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. I should be back. So literacy came up sort of just recently. And it's sort of a problem, yeah, but not really. So, people have, the professional philosophers have their code words, ontology and I can't, but they have a whole bunch of syllogism. They have all kinds of silly words they use to just say something simple like storytelling or something. Your story, So so all that's kind of bullshit. Okay, it's not like they're saying anything complicated or sophisticated. They're just using out of reach language, verbiage to pretend they're doing something surgical and important when no, they're just talking shit. So I don't see that as a real issue, people's literacy. I mean, you just have to be able to hear the words. In most cases now, you can hear them. You don't even have to read them. And be able to rationally understand what's being said. So yes, you can confuse people with bad choice of words, but people don't have to be very functionally, technically literate. Okay, let's just say. I'm an example. Okay, yeah, so I'm not a great reader or writer. I mean, if I had to read a script to make these videos, they wouldn't be very good. Yeah, so forget it. But anyway, I mean, I know some of you don't think they're very good anyway, but it doesn't, that doesn't bother me too much. All right, so the real literacy is in understanding the concepts of logic and the rules of logic. So you could argue that if you're not literate in philosophy, then you're not going to understand that you can't really have contradictions in your statements. And you can't pull something like, I believe it because I believe it, okay? Like faith is a non-starter. I mean, you don't believe something for no reason or mystical reasons or any of that kind of crap. You actually believe it because of something persuaded you, something convinced you. And the question is, was it the pretty hat, the woman was wearing? Is that what convinced you? Well, what convinced you? And the argument is for a lot of people, nothing convinced them in terms of anything with integrity. They believe something because mommy did, and it's not any better than that. And that's philosophical or argumentative poison. You can't have a rational conversation with people who believe those are legitimate statements you could make. You could actually say, well, mommy told me so, and that's supposed to impress somebody. No, that shouldn't impress anybody. So that kind of literacy is the real stumbling block, is people think faith is a good argument. No, it isn't. It's a really bad argument. All right, so it's really, you could argue that people should be smart enough, having read enough to know, about evolution and geology and all that kind of stuff. And then gods and ghosts and spirits and souls. become obviously silly theories. I mean, they're on their face, laugh out of the conversation. I mean, they're so ignorant and stupid, as childish even, as notions or explanations for existence. And so it's pretty hard to have a conversation, that's based on doing logic in an atmosphere where so many facts are going to be ignored or denied. Then you're just talking to a truther, and that's all religion is it's obviously a conspiracy theory. The God done it, just a cop-out, an evasion, just really bad. All right, so, we're, a creation of evolution, and I'd say evolution makes monstrosities, and so we're just one of the many kinds of monstrosity, and, most of the creatures occupying spaces in the niches of the environment, they all have some kind of grotesqueness, and we have ours, and it's just but these are just facts, and it's just a fact that there's no way to profile us into a carnivore, for example. I mean, there's no way to make this configuration of organism into something that runs down other animals and tears their flesh off and saws them into pieces with our no, it's not. It just doesn't work. It's not a theory, again, that makes any sense. It's just bad theory, and it's just people want it to be true, and it's just plainly not true. I mean, without fire, there's no such thing as humans eating animals. It just wouldn't happen. All right, so we go to what the hell is that? Can't see it. Can't see it. Can't read it. Rationalize. Yes. So all of these, elements that get in the way, the fact that people have found excuses for being mistreating animals, their greed, their nepotism, all of the isms. I don't know whether they, there should be a word for, let's see what I call it. What does that say? Can you read that? I don't think you could read it. Humanism is just kind of a funny one, because, you'd say that, well, humanism would be a bias for humans, and humanism is used as some term for the humanist as somebody who is supposed to be the generous thinker. So it's like some of these words don't even make any sense, because of the way they've changed their meaning. So, so I guess the point is that even the word rationalize, it should be irrationalize, right? I mean, people making rationalizations should be a good thing, being rational and applying logic, rationalize. But it's the negative, and so instead of using the inverse, which would be irrationalize, we don't. So this is where verbiage, I guess, can make a kind of a mess. I wouldn't call that because of elitist, it's just because of what catches on somehow. Horse feathers, some sort of, things that shouldn't be phrases end up being phrases. Groovy. It should have never happened. It shouldn't have been possible. Anyway, okay, so, what is this one? Personal goals. And I've talked a lot about just the fact that they have to have their place in proportion to the other goals, okay, that surround you, of all the other things that need to be accomplished to have a world that you can defend. It's not about defending your life, your personal place. It's about defending the whole game that we're playing. because without that defense, you have no justification for playing. Yeah, pretty much simple enough. Let's see. Yeah, so the whole idea is that we should be doing the make, deserve, have something to do with it thing, and if we can't do that, as a combat against nature, where it doesn't have anything to do with deserve. People get the plague not because they deserved it or earned it. It's always because they touched a fork that they shouldn't have touched. All right, they did something inadvertent, and now they're dead. Horribly killed. So it had nothing to do with a God's plan or nature's plan or any plan. It didn't have anything to do with deserve. It just had to do with circumstantial crap, bad luck, if you want to call it that. And that's it. And so until we can manufacture a world where deserve works, and it has something to do with it, we're hopeless. And then even if you could create deserve has something to do with it, you can't fix the problem that, I didn't deserve my existence. It's not a byproduct of some decision I made in a previous life or any of that kind of crap. It's just a byproduct of other people imposing it. So the deserve can never have anything to do with me. It can only have something to do with somebody else's act. It's always going to be an imposition. And, clearly, unless you know the imposition is impossible to be a negative, then you really can't impose it because you're going to violate somebody's deserve. So, you can never create this world, where enough deserve has something to do with it, where deserve has something to do with it enough. So, the argument could be made is that, even if you're playing the game with yourself, which you're not, even if your kids were your kids in some real sense, that they would be your personality and they would grow up to be you, just like you. The argument could still be made that you're poorly educated and stupid, and you didn't deserve to be poorly educated and stupid. So, there's just no way to get there from anywhere, because the system basically is dependent on us making a mess and cleaning up the mess we make, not doing anything else useful, valuable. All right, so the delusion of existence, no utility, use. So we can't fix anything that was broken before we got here, so to speak. I don't mean we, I just mean sentient life. A sentient feeling, happy, sad, blissful, tortured, tormented. Something that has those properties can't do anything for the universe. It doesn't, it doesn't replace something broken. A rock, sitting somewhere isn't broken. It doesn't need us to show up and make it into a feeling rock. It just doesn't accomplish anything. And the real argument is that all it inevitably does is lose money. It just bleeds a waste of suffering. And that be dumb, okay? Let's see. And so then if you were to even take existence as it is and then play a game with the idea of creation, a creator, you'd have to concede the creator of evolution would have to be a psychotic mass murderer, because that's all that happens, is that everything is psychotically murdered in usually some kind of highly unpleasant manner. We just don't cease to function, like where some warning light flashes and it goes, seatbelt, door ajar. We don't get a door ajar warning or some other system failure. And then slowly just fail to start. There's nothing benign in how we fail. It's catastrophic. I mean, it's a Tesla, catches fire and burns to death. So there's another good reason to recognize that this what we're brought into is the thing broken, and that's the thing we need to use our intelligence to apply solution to. And again, the simple solution is stop making more of it, and then you won't have to worry about it anymore. You won't have to be concerned with creating deserve. You won't have to be concerned with fairness. You won't have to be concerned with easing anything's pain, providing comfort. You won't have to worry about the starving Chinese people or some other kind of bullshit if they don't exist. So the simple solution is quit making them, and then you won't have to fix the world that is brutalizing them. Yeah, so that's simple enough. That's all I have written down. So it seems like it should be complete enough. So anyway, so the video I did during the week was just frankly, it didn't explore anything except just how people just talk a lot of words and don't say anything. And so it was, the original video was whatever 2 hours plus, and I played whatever 30 minutes of it, but it didn't change. I mean, it just kept doing the same thing it did for those 30 minutes. And somewhere towards the end, it might have smelled a little bit like it was just a bunch of capitalist jargon for, oh, please don't oppress the poor rich people, let them, free them from tax burden and responsibility to any social causes. They just can't bear the responsibility to, provide meager sustenance to poor people, that kind of crap. I have my tiny sympathies with that argument in the sense that we do too much to placate and encourage people to wallow in dysfunction, and that's a big mistake. Almost made it a for-profit. Crime almost pays. In the liberal mindset, they're pretty much saying, yes, go ahead, steal stuff, it's okay. We don't mind, and it's, you get what you subsidize, and they're essentially subsidizing bad behavior. So anyway, I won't get into a whole big rag about that, but my disappointment with liberal politics and how they've ruined it. Just absolutely ruined it. Anyway, okay, so I think that's probably a video. So we'll leave it there until the next time. But I mean, this, the problem isn't we don't have enough facts on this side of, oh, it's evolution and it's insidious and we ought to just let it go as a concept because it doesn't go anywhere. It just makes machines that are designed to win contests that couldn't possibly matter, just as we still are participating in human contests and glorifying nonsense, hitting baseball over fence, throwing ball in hoop, hitting puck into net, and then you get into the Olympics and they're even sillier, like three-legged race. They're just so, waxing ice in front of big giant puck. Just the silliest kind of crap. Shuffleboard. It's humiliating to be human when you start thinking about what humanity has glorified as something for another human being to spend a great deal of energy trying to be proficient at. It's just ridiculous, frankly. And we don't do anything to try to get humans' energy focused on trying to make a better world. It isn't something rewarded. It's almost the opposite. Like, you'll be punished for being, an abnormal if you attempt to, argue their doctrine, okay, as being insufficient or archaic, or like even just saying something against the Olympics, I guess, could get you terrorized, by some lunatic who, who has investment, in preserving this delusion that this is a useful thing for a human being to be doing. And that's, very disappointing. So, anyway, I think that's enough of a video. And, yeah. So, till the next time, when I will again, in this context, try to figure out, do the arguments need to be made, or do arguments about how to argue need to be made? And those arguments about how to argue are going to require people to be at least mature enough to know that they can't just use some concept of faith or whatever, some kind of notion of belief, and that's all they have to say is, I believe. Ooh, my car. Missed that car. Long time ago. That was like many lives ago. My first car. Well, my first real car. My first not $100 car. Anyway, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. Yeah. That'll do, and such.